Hello, everybody. I'm back. Welcome back to L Space, or welcome to L Space if you're new. My name is Tristan. It's been a minute. Um, it's been almost a month, over a month. I am actually not entirely sure. Basically, I moved. If you haven't noticed, this is a new setup, this is a new space. I moved to Seattle, or rather moved back to Seattle, which, if those of you who've been following the channel for any amount of time have probably heard me talk about how much I love Seattle, and so you can imagine that I am thrilled to be back. And yeah, I honestly couldn't be happier. The weather has been beautiful, and it's just been honestly a really, really lovely time. But also because of that, I just haven't had the brain space to do any kind of filming or editing or internet or any of that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's been a crazy month and a couple weeks or whatever, month and some change, but I'm hoping to get back into the swing of things with my filming and all of that. But we might have moved, but as you can imagine, the cats are still going crazy every time I sit down to film because Doug is now doing something in the background. Anyway, I wanted to give you a reading update now that I've given you a little bit of a life update. To be honest, I have no idea where I left off in my reading updates, so I'm going to just start fresh and start with kind of my, I guess, the first book that I finished when I moved back here, when I got back finally, and that is the May pick for the Alstora Very Gay Book Club, and that is Separate Rooms by Pier Vittorio Tondelli. It's my attempt at an Italian accent, but and this was translated by Simon Pleasance, and this is apparently a just like an Italian classic as far in like queer literature. It was published in the 80s by Tondelli, and he, I guess, according to rather his biography, the author biography on the inside flap here, he published a small but very influential body of work. This, of course, is the one and only of his that I've read, but this actually ended up being a very powerful book, and I can see why it was selected for the gay book club. It navigates a lot of grief, life, death, the position that the main character Leo is in because he's survived his lover Thomas, and just what it is like to exist after your lover has died. And it's also kind of a very sudden death, and they don't fully tell you what he died from, what Thomas died from, but it could be AIDS given the time frame. They call it cancer, which was something that they would say during the early days of the AIDS crisis, is that people would just die from cancer. It was called gay cancer for some of those parts. But anyway, this really was a beautiful book, and Andrew Sean Greer says it's possibly the best book he's ever read. And I don't know if it's necessarily the best book I've ever read, but it's certainly amazing nonetheless. I found myself just kind of swept away by the richness of the writing and the meditations that the main character goes through about his life, his own mortality, and sort of him grappling with the loss of his love. And it's very interesting. And it's when Eric Cervini, who's the head of the book club, or I guess the curator and moderator, when he was introducing this, he was like, "This book is perfect for fans of Call Me by Your Name." And at that point I was like, oh no, we can't do this, because Call Me by Your Name is my single most hated book of all time. And the fact that this also has a foreword by Andre Aciman, the author of Call Me by Your Name, I was very afraid of getting into this one. But fear not, this book was nothing like Call Me by Your Name because, well, it was good. And yeah, that's all I'll say about it. So this really was a lovely book, and it's one that I think I'm going to reread because it does have some elements in it that I am interested in academically, and since I'm looking at literature of this time period for like future studies, this is very much one that's going to fit very neatly into that category. So yeah, that was Separate Rooms. Another queer book that I read was one that came out shortly before I left, and that was Open Heaven by Sean Hewitt, who's also the author of his memoir, All Down Darkness Wide, which I've not read but have had very vigorously and highly recommended to me by several friends, of whose opinion I very much trust. And so I was also very lucky to get to go see Sean Hewitt on the U.S. release day for this novel in Boston. He was at the Harvard bookstores, and I, of course, was like, well, I'm gonna go. So I did, and here it is. It's signed and personalized to me, which is very sweet. He is delightful, by the way. He is a very, very nice and charming person that was just a delight to share space with. So this novel is very interesting because it bears a lot of similarities to On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. And also like The End of Eddie by Edouard Louis, Lie With Me by Philippe Besson, because it is the rural coming of age queer story. And the difference here is that those three have a narrative of more of, I guess, tragedy in a lot of ways, where they, not obviously in the Greek classic sense, but in the sense that they don't end happy. And this one doesn't necessarily end happy either. I'm not going to talk too much about the ending, obviously, because I don't want to spoil it, but it's sort of a bittersweet ending, whereas the other three have a little bit more of a depressing tone to the way that to the way that they conclude. I mean, sort of. Basically, the other ones draw a lot of tension from the fact that they are queer people who are living in a rural setting. And this also has a little bit of tension about being a queer person in a rural setting, this takes place in like northern England. But it's not, he doesn't experience a ton of homophobia or a ton of, slurs, bullying, those sorts of things. He's still treated kind of like an outcast, and because he's kind of the only one who is out, and he's sort of dealing with all of these feelings of both being an outcast and like sort of being alone with himself, but then also he falls pretty much head over heels for this boy who is just in town basically for the year. It follows the cycle of the season, so it starts in summer and concludes in spring. Yes. And each part is one that, follows kind of that cadence of the season, or just like the trajectory of the season, or what you would expect from it. So autumn is a decline, winter is kind of a dead season, and spring is sort of a flourishing, a bloom. And it's very tied to the natural world. It's got some really beautiful prose about the countryside and the town that it takes place in, and I very much enjoyed it. It's an interesting, I guess, not quite twist, but it's an interesting take on the rural queer coming of age novel, because it doesn't follow a lot of the same tropes where the main character is brutalized and his lover dies, that type of thing, which is maybe a spoiler for some of those other books. But this really was a lovely book, and I think that it's receiving a lot of love online, and I would like to also extend my own love for it, because it is quite lovely. one of the big things that I was very excited about in coming back to Seattle was that I am now very close to the Elliott Bay bookstore, which there will be some vlogs and some footage of that coming up somewhat soon, I hope. Which is just like a beautiful, amazing independent bookstore here in Seattle. And they also bring in a lot of really cool authors and things like that. And one of them was Sarah Schulman, who wrote Let the Record Show, which I have on my shelf back behind me. My queer shelf is out of frame, but it's there. And she was talking about her most recent book, The Fantasy and Necessity of Solidarity. And she was in the ACT UP movement in the 80s and 90s and was one of like the main organizers or one of the main activists, I guess, a pillar, if you will. And so getting to see her speak and just hear her discuss things was, a very transcendental experience for me, because she is kind of one of my heroes, and of course getting to meet her and having a book signed and all of that was really cool. She complimented my sweater, not this one, I'll wear it another time. But she was also delightful and lovely and very, very well spoken and everything you would expect from a seasoned activist. So she was talking about building solidarity and kind of what solidarity means, and also especially the necessity of solidarity in our present moment. She read a section about the zone of interest and sort of the reaction that's been had across, I guess, the viewership of that movie, that film. And that was the section that she read, and how she was talking about her own identity as a Jewish woman, coming to terms with and getting involved in the fight for Palestinian liberation. That was just the section she read, but really what she was getting at in the book with regards to solidarity is the necessity to put aside a lot of our sort of purity ideals, where we need to make sure that everybody conforms to our very strict criteria of ideology, which ends up kind of becoming dogma. So they must be pro-rights. They must be pro-choice. They must support gay rights. They must support trans rights. They must support women's rights in general. And basically what we kind of end up doing in that is that if they don't align perfectly with with kind of this like pinnacle of again, like ideological purity as far as on the left, then we won't collaborate with them, even though we might have similar goals and can be very useful to each other. So the example she gave was the new Pope, who is very good on immigration and has confronted J.D. Vance about that multiple times. And, he's not great when it comes to women's rights or queer rights, but if we want to get some traction and success in the fight to save immigrants in America, he is going to be a very useful and powerful ally in that struggle. And, putting aside the things where we don't agree to get things done in the areas where we do agree. So we want to preserve and protect immigrant rights here in the United States. The Pope is potentially a very useful and powerful ally to have in that struggle. And once we build a relationship with him, maybe we can get him on our side when it comes to women and queer people, right? So the idea is, of course, not being so strict on who we work with, but rather what we are getting done is what this book is largely discussing. And I think it's a very important book, because I think people, especially on the left, get a little persnickety with that kind of thing. And I know that the sort of purity culture in the left can be very distracting and very detrimental to what we're actually able to achieve. So that was a very important book, and I have not read it or even started it for that matter, but I'm very excited to read it because I think it's going to be very good. And her writing was great too. Like the sections that she was reading out were very, very engaging. I have also had quite the fantasy kick, just a calling to read some fantasy, and so I started the second in the Shadow of the Leviathan series, which is A Drop of Corruption, the sequel to The Tainted Cup. And this is fantasy Sherlock Holmes, where you have these people who have just basically sort of magical biochem mastery, like they've mastered life and can just grow houses from the ground, which is pretty cool. And then also like consume different grafts to give you perfect memory or enhanced spatial and calculating faculties in your brain, or like heightened senses, so you have a really heightened sense of smell and hearing and sight and all of that sort of stuff. So it's really interesting the way it's not really even fantasy necessarily. Like they do imply that some of these alterations and things like that come from more or less magical sources, and so but nobody is magical, right? Nobody's like shooting spells or anything like that. It's all potions and things like that, potions and herbology and whatever. But yeah, this has been, I'm flying through it, absolutely devouring it, because I loved the first one. The first one was so good because the setting is so immersive and the characters are very engaging, and this one certainly is also following suit. Like the mystery, I think, in this one is a little bit more engaging, and like there's some palace intrigue, which is fun. But all of the characters in this one are I think a little more engaging for me. So there's a character in this one named Mallow, and she is the best. I love her so much. And this just like there's so many threads, and well, I guess in this one there's so many vines, and it's very tangled and very wet and hot and humid, and it's just really cool. Yeah, I really love it. I have a hard time putting this one down. The fact that I'm holding it and not reading it is causing a little bit of a problem in my brain right now, but that is beside the point. I am loving this book, and it's such a good series. I cannot recommend it enough. It's funny, it's engaging, it's suspenseful, and like there's a lot of twists and turns in this one. There's a lot more twists and turns in this one than there were in the first one, to where you're just like, oh crap, what's gonna happen next? So I'm having a great time. Last but not least, I went to go see Eddie Izzard perform a one-woman show of Hamlet here in Seattle, which was wild. I had very little expectation or idea of what I was getting myself into when I bought the ticket to go see that, but like she killed it. So in preparation for that, it's been probably like 2 decades, to be honest, since I have had any sort of Hamlet exposure. So I have also been very curious about the rest of the works of William Shakespeare. Book Chat with Pat, you've gotten me very interested in his sonnets, so I found a used copy of the Oxford Shakespeare, the complete works, which this is a bludgeoning weapon, I think. It's like 30 pounds, which is a lot. I don't think it's actually that much. I mean, it might be like 20, 25. But anyway, so this is all of his stuff. I've been sort of reading the sonnets in order because Pat was talking about how she had a really good time reading them in order from start to finish, and there was a little bit of a through line. And I had always had kind of a negative opinion of William Shakespeare when I was in high school, because when you're in high school, oftentimes he's just a little bit too difficult and just sort of over your head. But now that I have a more refined understanding of literature and more, I guess, of an interest in getting more exposure to some of the classic works, I am wanting to read and see more Shakespeare. So I read Hamlet. I read most of Hamlet before getting to go see Eddie Izzard perform. And this is very heavy. I'm putting this down. And she, again, one woman show. She did all of the characters and relied really only on, there were no props. The setting, the stage set was basically just blank walls. They kind of resembled a like corner of a building, like on the street corner. And I'll explain why that's relevant in a minute. But she really relied mostly on sound and lighting effects to get different aspects of the play. So she performed Shakespeare's Hamlet. Let's just make sure that that's clear. Like, she wasn't doing an adapted version of it and like, you know, the Izzard version of Shakespeare. She was really doing Shakespeare's version. And there were a couple lines that she skipped and used, again, lighting or sound effects to invoke, but otherwise it was the exact script of the play. And the thing that I admired so much and was so captivated with in her performance was that, in my experience, when I've seen Shakespeare performed, it's often very overdramatic, or it's very stuffy. It's a little too formal, and it's like, "Oh, I'm performing a Shakespeare play. Let us all enjoy the highest of culture," type of thing. That's been my experience. And I think also I've seen some performances where people are more like academic about it. Eddie Izzard's background is as a street performer. And so the fact that she approached this play from the background and perspective of a street performer and a comedian worked really, really well. She infused the play with such a lovely amount of humor, but without taking away any of the intense drama of the play. Like, I was really captivated by it. The way that she paid attention to her diction and the way that she evoked each of the characters, even though she was playing all of them, was simply stunning. I really hope that she is filming it to have it, you know, available as streaming once she's done touring this, because I really think that this is the type of thing that people will study. I think that she nailed Hamlet, like, without a doubt. She's also taking it on tour, so if you get the chance to see Eddie Izzard perform Hamlet in her one-woman show, you absolutely need to go see it. It is 100% worth every penny and every moment that you're going to spend doing it. It is so, so good, and inspired me to read more Shakespeare. So that's a win, I think, for her. And, you know, the fact that she's a trans woman performing this show, like, I think that also adds a very interesting and powerful element to it. You know, I think that adds a certain versatility to the experience that she can bring to each of the characters and brings them to life in a way that I don't think that a cis person is quite able to do in the context of a one-person show. So anyway, I think that she did just such a phenomenal job, and I think that she's very uniquely positioned to do it in the way that she did, and I think that she was phenomenal, and I love her, and she's great. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. I am gonna get going. I'm gonna go read in the park because it's so close to my house. It's like a 5-minute walk, and it's like the nicest park, and it's where people bring all their dogs to go hang out and play after they're off work. So I'm gonna go do that. I'm gonna go read A Drop of Corruption in the park because it's a beautiful day and it's warm, and you have to take advantage of those. So I am going to be filming another episode of the Listening Library, or the Listening Corner, sometime soon, so be on the lookout for that. So that's going to be probably my next thing that I do. But until then, I wish you well, take care, and I'll see you next time in another video. Bye.